The day has come. NASCAR finally has its own Netflix docu-series similar to Formula One, the PGA, golf, tennis, NFL, whatever it may be. They are now on the list of sports who have a docu-series. They've been trying to hit for years on it, but have not yet done it. They tried the Race for the Championship series last year or 2 years ago with USA Network, and it's just too hard to access and all that. But then they finally inked a deal with Netflix to get this thing done, and they focused on the 2023 NASCAR playoffs. I watched all 5 episodes of the show. They are fully available on the Netflix. I'm going to talk about them. I've got 9 pages of notes here that we're going to go through. We're going to do a slight recap of the actual show itself, some of the topics they talk about. And then at the end, I'm going to give my overall thoughts on the show, if I enjoyed it, if I thought it was good, just some of the small details, all that stuff. So, yeah, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about NASCAR. We talk about NASCAR on this channel all the time. If you're new, I don't know how many new people are watching this thing, but if you are, hi. Hope you enjoy this video. I hope you enjoyed the series. And they released this at a really good time because NASCAR starts up this Sunday. They got their preseason race at the LA Coliseum, the Busch Clash. So let's get straight into it. This first episode. Now, obviously, as I said earlier, this is focused on the NASCAR playoffs. The playoffs, there's 16 drivers that enter the playoffs, and the cutoff is at Daytona, or it was at Daytona last year. There was still 1 spot available left. Bubba Wallace had a big points buffer. Ty Gibbs had a chance, but it was a little bit of a long shot on points. But if there was someone who had won that race that had not already won in 2023, they would be in the playoffs over Bubba Wallace. They set up that storyline of the final couple of playoff spots and all that. But first, they introduce a driver. And of course, that driver is Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin, he is one of the most successful drivers in NASCAR history. He has 3 Daytona 500s. He has over 50 career Cup Series wins. But his one issue, the one thing he's missing, is a NASCAR Cup Series championship. He's also the co-owner of 2311 Racing, which is the team that Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick drive for, which we will talk about them more later in this. And as I said, Hamlin, as a team owner, he comes into this last race. He's already in the playoffs. He's won a couple of races up to this point. So his question is, they ask him, what would you do? You've got your teammate Ty Gibbs and Bubba Wallace, the car you own in front of you. Who would you push to the checkered flag to go to the playoffs? And he obviously picks the team he owns. But we see a lot on Denny Hamlin in this episode. Honestly, the first couple of episodes, we see behind the scenes. He has this mansion right on a lake. I'm assuming it's in North Carolina, but we see his home life. He's got a dog. He's got 2 kids, a girlfriend. And, we get to see some of the behind the scenes of Denny Hamlin, who he is. And one of the things I thought was very interesting about his section is he has this one quote. I've heard him say it before, but it's a very interesting quote that I think everyone should listen to. Longtime NASCAR fans, new NASCAR fans, whoever you may be. He basically says, look, another athlete like him, Denny Hamlin, if I'm Denny Hamlin, I can make a 3-pointer. I can hit a golf ball a certain amount of yards, but not everyone can get into a race car like me and run a faster lap time. That's what sets the race car drivers apart from the other athletes, and it's a pretty fair point. If you look at today's sports landscape, if you put Denny Hamlin on a basketball court, he can make a 3-pointer. If you put him on a golf course, I'm sure he could get a par on a hole. But if you take Jordan Spieth, if you take Kevin Durant, and you put them in a race car, I don't think they're getting anywhere near Denny Hamlin's lap times. I just always find that quote interesting. Now, Denny Hamlin, he's kind of the villain of NASCAR over the past couple of years. He's ruffled some feathers on track, but he also wins a lot. So, he's a polarizing figure in the NASCAR world. And this one quote from him, he said, "I don't want people to see me as a, aw, shucks, he's so nice kind of guy." He said, F that. We keep it family friendly on this channel, but he says F that. The show they really let drivers go unfiltered. So I guess morning don't let your children watch this, something like that. But in conclusion, Denny Hamlin, he's the villain of NASCAR. He's a polarizing figure. He wins, but he has not won a championship, and that is his biggest defining factor, is that people know him as the guy who can't win a championship despite all else. So then they go over to their next driver. William Byron. And the William Byron story is a unique one. Do you know why? Oh my God, I'm about to annoy longtime NASCAR fans with this one. Because his career, did you know, it started on a computer. They say that all the time on the broadcasts. It used to get really annoying, but they've kind of chilled out with it the past couple of years. But yes, William Byron's career started on a computer, and he has made his way up through the ranks. He's now a Cup Series driver. He drives an iconic NASCAR Cup Series number, the number 24. My personal GOAT, Jeff Gordon, drove that car, had a lot of success, and William Byron's having a breakout year. He's won a few races. He's in the playoffs. He's a favorite to win the championship, and we get to see some of his behind-the-scenes life. He's dating a fellow competitor's sister, so that's an interesting aspect that they touch on later. He's got a dog, and he also still has his computer that he still races on. So then they switch back to Denny Hamlin, and he co-owns 2311 with Michael Jordan. They touch on Michael Jordan a bit, and then they go to their next driver. Yeah, boy! And Bubba Wallace, as I said, is trying to make the playoffs. This is his chance at Daytona. His teammates already locked into the playoffs. He really wants to make it. He hasn't made it in the playoffs yet in his career. They kind of show behind the scenes of his life, but more at the shop and stuff. They don't really go into details of his home life, but he does have a girlfriend. He also has a dog, but he goes, to the shop, team meetings, all that stuff. Now, one thing I wish that they did with this episode is that they built up the suspense between Bubba Wallace and Ty Gibbs for that final spot more. I know realistically it wasn't, that close of a battle. 32 points is a lot of points in NASCAR in one race. That's like 32 positions, and there's only 40 cars in the race. But I wish they built up the suspense a little bit more just for the casual fan. Obviously, if you're a longtime fan, you know what's going on. There's not a lot of suspense there, but for a casual fan, I think it would have been something more if they just built up a little bit more suspense. But ultimately, Bubba Wallace does get the final playoff spot. And then Marty Smith, he talks about kind of the at-track site. He's a reporter, and he talks about how the sights, the smells, the scene itself, everything about it at a race. He said the words intoxicating and overwhelming, and I got to agree with him there. It's a pretty cool experience being at a NASCAR race. Yes, you're going to see some interesting people. I cannot deny that. But the NASCAR cars going by you at 200 miles an hour is really cool. The sounds are cool. The smells are cool. Maybe I'm weird. I am. And at the end of the episode, Bubba Wallace makes the playoffs. Prosper, Texas mentioned. Chris Buescher won. And we move on to day 2, or episode 2, I should say. And it opens up with Bubba Wallace at Media Day for the playoff drivers. And then they explain the playoffs. Here's the thing. NASCAR has playoffs. If you know me, I don't like the playoff system. This is racing, not the NFL or the NBA. We don't need playoffs, but NASCAR still has playoffs, so I still have to talk about it. Sorry, I just think it should be known that I don't like the playoffs, but they actually do a good job explaining it. They truly do. They make it simple. They make it easy to comprehend, so there's a playoff system. And then they go to their next driver. Now they tell the Joey Logano story. Joey Logano, a 2-time Cup Series champion at this point at the filming of this Netflix documentary. He's the defending champion entering the playoffs as he won the 2022 title. And he has had quite the career story. Joey Logano, as a young driver, highly regarded. His nickname was Sliced Bread because, he was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. Extremely talented, goes up to the Cup Series at a very young age, is one of the youngest Cup Series winners of all time with Joe Gibbs Racing. But after a couple of years of struggling, they let him go. He goes to Team Penske, and after that, the rest is history. He's won 2 Cup Series championships. He's won, I want to say, over 30 races with them. Joey Logano has had a lot of success with Team Penske and is a future NASCAR Hall of Famer. Now, once again, they show some more behind-the-scenes stuff that I'll talk about later on. I'm going to give like a full description of my overall thoughts. Then they show the first playoff race. Denny Hamlin at Darlington. It's one of his best tracks. And they have a pit issue. A loose wheel happened, and they had really been emphasizing in this episode that the pit crew, they had an issue at Daytona. They made a mistake at Daytona, and they can't afford these mistakes, and they go and do this in the first playoff race. So Denny's sad that he lost the race due to that issue. And they move on to some different storylines. Hendrick Motorsports, they kind of introduce, and then they move on to Denny Hamlin as a team owner looking at 2311 Racing. He loves architecture. He said the words that he loves architecture. And then we go to our next driver. Now, Tyler Reddick is a two-time Xfinity Series champion. The Xfinity Series is the step below the Cup Series, the top level. And they kind of tell the story about how Tyler Reddick essentially won the naming rights to his son, that if he won the championship in 2019, he got to name his son. If he did not win the championship, his wife would get to name his son. Now they move on to the storyline of Joey Logano, the defending champion, being at risk of elimination, at risk of it. He eventually gets eliminated, spoiler alert. You can go watch, as I said, you can go watch the show. I'm not going to tell you every single detail. But then we move on to episode 3, and episode 3 starts with the introduction of yet another driver.
He'll let it fly.
Now, as you can see from that clip, Ross Chastain is known for throwing a watermelon off the top of his car whenever he wins a race. He is quite the figure, and they describe him as that. He is a 7th or 8th generation watermelon farmer who has now become a race car driver, and a successful one at that. They talk about some of his most iconic moments in the Cup Series with the Hail Melon. They also talk about some of his controversies on the track where he's wrecked some people, gotten into some feuds, and then they just kind of tell the Ross Chastain story. Then they move on to the round of 12. They talk about Hendrick winning their 300th race, Team Penske, how they've struggled, Logano's out, Blaney has been meh. And then that's when they actually introduce
Yeah, Blaney!
Exactly what he's done.
Ryan Blaney, your next driver to be introduced. He's riding a horse. He's with his girlfriend. They kind of show a little bit of the behind the scenes of the Ryan Blaney life. And then we go to Talladega. And the Talladega infield gets mentioned. And that is a horrifying thought. For those of you who don't know, Talladega is like the most stereotypical NASCAR track. And things happen on the infield. That is all I will say. Some more things happen. Blaney wins Talladega, more behind the scenes stuff. I'm trying to speed up this recap so we can get to my overall thoughts. Episode 4, we introduce yet another driver.
Here it is, your race winner, Christopher Bell. Donuts, anyone? As Bell brings the car down the front straightaway, he's burning the hides right off that thing.
Christopher Bell. I love how they portrayed Christopher Bell in this show. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later, but one of the big things is that they doubted him. Like, they had kind of planned this show out, and they were looking at different stories. Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, William Byron, how things were going heading into the playoffs for these different drivers, and they were picking, all right, here's the stories we're going to follow early in the playoffs, and then once it gets late into the playoffs, we'll follow the guys who we think could get in or, who are probably in. They didn't start interviewing Christopher Bell, following Christopher Bell until late in the playoffs because they didn't see him getting that far. And they blatantly admitted it on the show. And Bell's like, happy to prove you wrong. And that's something I like about Christopher Bell in the show. The way they portray him, he's quiet yet confident. Now they focus on the Vegas race in which Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell battle for the win. Christopher Bell falls just short, but the next race at Miami, he does not. He ends up winning it. Now, for this Miami race, what they focus on is Christopher Bell winning, as I said, but also the heartbreak for Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin, as I said, he is known for not winning a championship. He's got a great shot this year. He's been extremely consistent, has picked up a few wins, and he's looking good heading into this Miami race. He talks about something that we'll talk about later in terms of his season, his just a shoulder issue that he had. But they go to Denny Hamlin's parents. And this is just going to add to all the memes. But Michael Jordan, friend and co-owner of 2311 with Denny Hamlin, gave Denny Hamlin's dad a cigar. And it's in a box, and he said, we're going to bust this open, open up this cigar case when Denny finally wins a championship. And, Denny Hamlin's dad's like, oh, what if this is the year? Spoiler alert, it's not the year. But the instant I saw that, I was like, oh man, why they got to show this? That's just heartbreaking. Yeah, so Denny Hamlin blows a tire or some mechanical failure happens at Homestead, puts him in a really bad situation going into the elimination at Martinsville. They go to Ryan Blaney, back to him. And Ryan Blaney had a very interesting quote. He said, in terms of winning a championship, they were asking him what it would mean. And he said, if I was looking at my career, would I have 15 wins and 2 championships? Or would I rather have 70 wins and 0 championships? And he said he'd rather have 15 wins and 2 championships. And I was like, man, they showed that right after the Denny Hamlin segment. Oh, man, damn, shots fired. And then they go to episode 6. Episode 6 is pretty straightforward. It's the championship. They focus on all 4 championship drivers. They kind of introduce Kyle Larson. I barely introduced Kyle Larson on here, I guess. Christopher Bell has a mechanical issue. He could feel it early on in the race. I love how they described that detail of him feeling the brakes going out, overheating. Blaney wins the championship. They show some of the behind-the-scenes footage of him and his parents, him and his girlfriend, him and, some of his friends and stuff. And then they also show the losers, interview the losers, Larson, Bell, Byron, how they feel after the race, all that stuff. And then they end the show, which I really liked, with kind of a montage. I don't know if that's the right word, but talking to all the drivers that they've talked to throughout the series about, well, you didn't win the championship, so what's next? And they're like, well, we look forward to 2024. We got another shot next year, blah, blah, blah. And I like that they ended on that because 2024 is here and it's about to start. So they're already there. So that is a recap. That was a super duper long recap. So now we go to my overall notes on this show. I have a few just topics here that I want to discuss. And the first one is explaining things. Now, you may be saying that's just the most vague thing that I can say. Well, guess what? This show is not vague. They explain things. As I said earlier, they explained the playoff format very well. They explain strategy, pit stops. In fact, they go behind the scenes. They show a pit crew practice happening at one of the team's shops, which I thought was really cool, to explain that, these pit crews, these aren't just your random guys on the street. These are like former professional athletes, former college athletes, high-level athletes that are still in their prime. And to this point, they are still athletes, high-level professional athletes. So I really like that they explained that, made that clear. I have had people ask me before, they've been like, oh, you want to work in NASCAR? Why don't you just be a pit crew member? I am not a professional athlete, people. It's not random people just going out there and pitting the cars. These are trained professional athletes. And they also explain some of the physical demand from the driver. It's not just, me and my car driving down the highway going, oh yeah, what's up? Oh, hey Tim, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. It's not driving like that. You're fully belted in. You got a helmet. You got a fire suit. It's hot in the car. It is a physically demanding sport, even for the drivers. And I like that they describe that. The next category I have is showing things. And as I said with the pit crew practice kind of thing, they actually show. They don't just explain that pit crews are important. They show that the pit crews are important by showing Denny Hamlin's pit crew their struggles, their penalties that cost him a race win. They show some of these team headquarters, the team shops, what's going on behind the scenes, team meetings, all these things that are going on. They show the simulator. Denny Hamlin goes to the Toyota TRD simulator. It's a full-blown simulator. He's in the cockpit of a car in which he's driving. He's collecting data for the team. The simulator is not just a computer that you drive on. It's actually moving with you. You got your helmet. You got your gloves. It's a full-blown simulator. And then just showing the behind the scenes of the families. Denny Hamlin with his wife and kids, Tyler Reddick, with his wife and his kid, Christopher Bell with his wife, Ryan Blaney with his dog and his girlfriend, just the things like that, just the simple things. People like to see that stuff. People like to see professional athletes outside of their normal work environment, see them as a human being in a sense. They also showed some driver duties that didn't include driving. Drivers have to go to a lot of sponsor events, NASCAR events, like they do Q&As at track over the weekend. NASCAR drivers extremely accessible compared to your average sport. They'll do Q&As pre-race in the fan zone, and they'll pick a few fans to ask questions to Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, whoever it may be. Drivers sign autographs all the time, just showing how accessible drivers can be. And then just showing the driver's emotions. I thought that was a big thing, and it really hits, whether you like him or you don't. Denny Hamlin, after that Martinsville race, he was crushed that he had been eliminated from the playoffs. He truly thought 2023 was going to be his year to win the championship, and when he fell short, he was crushed. They showed him in his motorhome, giving a hug to his daughters, to his girlfriend, and then they show him laid down in his bed in his motorhome, and he is just depressed almost. I mean, the guy is laying there just sad as can be, and his daughter goes up, gives him a hug or something, and truly crushed is the word I would use, and they actually show that. They don't just say, they don't go to Chris Gabehart, or they don't go to Denny Hamlin's girlfriend and say, how was he? And they don't just say, oh, he was crushed. They actually show it. And they do the same thing with Christopher Bell. After his brake rotor exploded at Phoenix, they show him in his motorhome just kind of sad, giving a hug to his wife and all that stuff. A couple of random notes. One of them is more NASCAR related, like in terms of how it impacted last year. Denny Hamlin's shoulder injury. Denny Hamlin, he had off-season shoulder surgery. Chase Elliott had off-season shoulder surgery, but Chase Elliott, he was like, oh, no, this was planned long in advance. It didn't affect me. Denny Hamlin seemed like it was affecting him. He talked about it during the docuseries, like as it was being filmed, like, yeah, I've got the shoulder problem. My collarbone has grown into my rotator cuff or something. I don't remember exactly, but you could see he was in physical pain at times. He was doing pre-race, physical therapy sessions, heating on his shoulder, all that stuff, and talked about how his motion, it hurt to do simple things as flipping switches in the cars. And they showed him getting out of the car at Homestead after his crash, and he was only using his left hand. Like his right arm, he basically was holding it like it was in a sling, just motionless. So I'm curious if that actually impacted Denny Hamlin late last season. And then another thing is, did you know that there was a second place trophy for the championship? They showed Ross Chastain's second place trophy from the 2022 championship. Ty Norris did. I had no idea that was a thing. I thought they only handed out a championship trophy, but apparently there's a second place in the championship trophy. Wishes. Now this list actually is not that long. I really thought this would be a longer list. I was cautiously optimistic heading into the show, but they did a really good job of simplifying things, but not simplifying it too much, describing things as I explained earlier. They showed things really good in really good detail, and they told stories pretty well. Denny Hamlin not having a championship, Christopher Bell being doubted, things like that. They actually told these stories pretty well. And look, when you already know the outcome of the story 2-3 months later, it's kind of hard to tell the stories, but they did a pretty fine job if you ask me. I was actually pretty impressed. Now, the only thing I wish, and this isn't even it's a long shot possibility because I know they can't interview all 16 drivers. I know they can't follow all 16 stories around, but something I wish they had done is I do wish there were a couple more stories. They could have gotten more than 5 episodes out of this thing. I would have loved to see Kevin Harvick's final race, what the following him around, his final playoff run, even though it was short, to follow that. Or even Martin Truex Jr. Imagine showing the emotions. He wins the regular season championship at Daytona, and then in the playoffs, he absolutely collapses, just following him around, getting his emotions on that. I think that would have been a really unique story. And then on the other side of things, Chris Buescher, he was the hottest driver heading into the playoffs, showing his deep run into the playoffs, yet falling just short. I would have loved to have seen those 3 stories, but once again, I know that they couldn't have followed all 16 drivers, so respectfully, it's just, I would have appreciated seeing that, and I'm not holding it against them that they didn't. Now, who are the stars of the show in my book? The lead star, you are not going to believe whose name I'm going to say. Booty Barker. That guy is hilarious. I don't know if he's trying to be hilarious or not, but there are so many times watching him, like just the things he would say that would just make me laugh so hard. I'd be like, I love this guy. I get him. Like, he was amazing. He was serious, but also like it felt like, I mean, he just gets it. I don't know how else to describe it. I really liked Booty Barker in the show. I want more booty. It sounds so weird, but Booty Barker, man, he was the start of the show. Ross Chastain, he was brutally honest. Denny Hamlin was brutally honest. I love them. Dave Blaney had a cameo. You can't leave a stars list without Dave Blaney. Gianna, which was Ryan Blaney's girlfriend, she had one of the hardest lines in the show. Obviously, this isn't pre-written. She just said that. She said, like, you're Ryan effing Blaney. I don't know why. I was like, ooh, that was cool. I don't know. And then Christopher Bell. I'm telling you, I loved how they portrayed Christopher Bell. Just that kind of, he's been doubted. People have always kind of doubted him. They kind of forget about him. His teammate has won 3 Daytona 500s. His other teammates won a championship. His other teammate is the grandson of the team owner. Christopher Bell has had a lot of success, but people kind of just forget about him because, he's kind of quiet and reserved, but then he goes out there and he proves people wrong consistently. And I like that about Christopher Bell, and I really like how they portrayed him in the show. I think he's going to gain some new fans from this thing. Quiet, reserved, very confident. Man, can he drive a race car. Now, some of my final thoughts on this show, on NASCAR Full Speed. We've gotten rid of the notebook. We've gotten rid of the highlighter. I honestly really appreciated that they appealed to both the casual and new fan and the longtime hardcore fan. I really did truly appreciate that. From the casual aspect, from the new fan aspect, just getting to know the drivers, getting to learn who they are, and also some of the things that they described. They didn't describe every technical, small detail of the car, but they explained that there is a rigid inspection process. These cars are built to be very similar, just simple things like that. A longtime fan, they already know that, but the new fan may not. And when you say it simple, when you say it nice and easy, and you get people who are important telling you this, I think it appeals to both sides. The longtime fan, they know that this person, they know Marty Smith, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Chris Gabehart, Kyle Larson. These are the guys. They trust their opinions. They know what they're talking about. So they can tell these new fans when they ask the longtime hardcore fan, oh, what do you think about, Dale Jr. saying this? But he knows what he's talking about. So I thought it's very difficult when you're doing something on a sport to appeal to multiple sides of this thing, whether it's the new fan base or the old fan base. And I felt like they did a pretty good job of that. Once again, I thought the show was done pretty well. They had some beautiful shots overall, whether it was just above the track. Like, one of my favorite shots from the show is from the parking lot in Phoenix. They kind of show the grass at first, and then they kind of pan up the camera, and it shows the racetrack and the mountains in the background with the sunset. Oh, that was a beautiful shot. But overall, I really enjoyed the show. I really thought they did a great job with it, describing things, showing things, just simplifying things that don't need to be overly complicated, and appealing to both sides of a fan base. So let me know what you thought of NASCAR Full Speed, the new Netflix docuseries based on NASCAR. I'm curious to see if they do a season 2. I'm curious to see if it's just the playoffs again, whatever it may be. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. We got our first race of the season coming up. We'll do one more paint scheme preview. We've done 2 of them already. And we will do that probably on Friday. I will confirm that later in the week in the community post, so make sure to check those always. And yeah, thanks again for watching this video. Hope you enjoy.